I brainwash myself every morning, not with coffee or with motivational quotes, but with systems. Because motivation isn't something that you find, it is something that you build, and something that you build over time. And most people would think that, they lose motivation or it disappears because, they're lazy. But that's wrong. Motivation is something that dies out because you just can't see the progress that you're making. Or at least you don't know if you're progressing, or you don't know how you're progressing. So if you're like 18 and, you're trying to edit your videos and, to be honest, you just can't stay on track, perhaps you'll tab out and switch to something else, or, you'll just doom scroll. Perhaps you'll, look at a few TikToks of someone telling you to just get back to work, and then you'll do it for like 10 minutes, but you can't really stay consistent. Then this video is for you, because I used to do the exact same thing back in 2021 and the early stages of 2022 when I didn't know why I was editing. I didn't need more hype. I couldn't just live off of consistently scrolling on motivational videos and then getting back to work, and then scrolling motivational videos and getting back to work, because I needed something more permanent, something that I could actually live by day without having to constantly do something. So I'm going to show you a more permanent solution to your motivation, something that you only have to do once and that'll help you to carry out throughout the next 5 years of your life. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through 3 different stages of how to constantly stay motivated. We're going to be going through what motivation really is, and a lot of people might think that they know what it is, but trust me, there's always more to learn. And we're going to be going through this later on. Then we're going to be going through how motivation is created and how it's lost, so you can learn how to both make sure that it stays there and, of course, never lose it. And then finally, I'm going to provide you with some free worksheets and some free tools to help you with your motivation that you're only going to have to fill out once. And don't worry, there's no email sign up, like you could probably just see in the description right now. But before you click onto those, let's actually go through everything first, so you know what to do, you know how everything works. Then I'll take you through the exact steps for the worksheet so that, you'll know what to do, once you get there. Now, firstly, we need to actually cover what motivation is, right? Now, to put it really simple, there's 3 core parts of motivation. Number 1, it's about the reward, okay? You've got to think about, what would this success mean to me? What would this do for me? Once you have this goal in mind, or this thing that you want to change, you're going to now have to do the work to get there. But before you do the work, you got to think about, like, okay, well, why do I want this? What's this going to do for me? So you might start asking some things like, well, what problem in my life will be solved? So if you're broke and you want to be not broke, well then, you just won't be broke. As simple as that, right? You won't have to worry about, money troubles with rent or with food, or, you can be that one cool guy who pays for everyone's dinner. What new things will this unlock? Okay, will you be able to, let's say, for example, with that money example, will you be able to buy new things? Okay, will you be able to buy things that you didn't think you could buy before? There's probably some things that would change that you didn't even know would change. Finally, how would my life change? What would be easier? What would be harder? And if this new hard problem is coming into your life, is it worth switching out these problems? Which most likely it is. Then we have probability. So, how, not possible, because we don't want to think about what's possible. It is possible. Believe me, whatever your goal is, it is possible, unless physics says no. So I doubt that, your goals will be something like learning how to fly, with by waving your arms. It's probably going to be more something to do with editing, or with money, or with, perhaps your life, food, time, stuff like that. So, some things that you want to think about is like, okay, well, first off, has anyone done this before? Because if no one has done it before, then there's probably a good reason for that. It being either difficult or impossible. And then the second one is like, is there something about me that says no? Is there something about me specifically that won't allow me to do this? And again, most likely there's not. Unless it was like, becoming the fastest man in the world and, you have no legs. Well then, that'd be pretty difficult. This is something you want to think about. But a lot of people just go to this first before they go to this. And then once they answer this first, they'll probably say, I'm too young, or, people don't respect me that way, or, I'm not from America. So, I can't get American clients. Again, whatever reason, that you could think it's about you, perhaps something to do with your confidence. I can't talk to clients, so, that's not going to happen for me. And then finally is, do I know how to do it? Now, this one is a probable chance that you don't know how to do something, but that's fine because you can learn as you go. And there are also goals where you do know how to do it. It's just a matter of willpower and sacrifice and environment. And then, to that you can solve later. And then finally, we have cost. So what will I have to sacrifice to get it? And the usual three are time, money, and people. And by people, I don't mean like you actually, sacrifice their lives. I just mean like, you're going to have to start saying no to people that you don't usually say no to, or you wouldn't like to say no to. People like close friends and family, the ones who are there for you every day. You're going to have to start saying no to them in order to, reach the goal that you want. And the reason this matters is because you are always going to be motivated for a goal in specific, right? You don't just do things out of reason. You have a reason to do it. You have something that you want out of this situation, something that you want to achieve. And motivation is what gets you there. Because if there is no actual reason for it, then you'd never think about doing it in the first place. So it's reward X probability X cost. I've got a few examples here. We're going to, quickly scan through them, and you might be able to relate to some of these. So, for example, losing 10 kilos or 23 pounds, move into your own apartment, and then make 10K per month as a freelancer. So, for example, with reward, and when it comes to losing 10 kilos of fat, you want to feel comfortable in clothes again. Perhaps you've got to pull down your shirt every time that your belly gets revealed. The same thing with this, stop feeling self-conscious in public, and health markers. So, you don't want to be out of breath when you do the most basic of things. And, your life will be a lot easier because you're going to start to feel a bit more like yourself. You're going to be less in your head, and overall, you're just going to be happier, right? And you want to think about, what would this mean to me? We often think about the very shallow things. And by shallow, I just mean we think about the most obvious ones, but we never really go deep into it. And later on in this video, we're going to be going over how to get deep into it and the exact questions you need to ask. And don't worry, I've laid all of that out for you. You just need to answer the questions yourself and, talk to yourself for a bit, which sounds a bit weird, but it's necessary. And then, with probability, you've got to think about okay, well, is this going to work out? Am I going to be able to do this? Well, first of all, many people have done this. It is true, millions of people have gone through the transformation of a weight loss. It is everywhere. It's pretty hard to deny the fact that losing weight is possible. And yeah, there's plenty of methods. And chances are, because those methods are so publicly known, you probably know how to lose weight. You could very easily, look up free programs to help you with discipline and losing weight and eating the right foods. And you're always going to have small bits of progress that are going to help make you realize, okay, this is possible. And it gets easier over time. And then finally, we've got cost. Now, again, cost doesn't just have to be money. It can be time and it can be people. For example, hunger and cravings. At the beginning, it'll get very difficult, but then over time, this kind of goes away. Time spent preparing food or exercising. So, if you're the kind of person that works 10 hours a day and you just don't want to cook, well, you're going to have to give up some of those hours in order to cook. And of course, exercise. And then start saying no to people. When people invite you out to go eat, or when they say hey, do you want to order in? You say no. And these are costs. These are things you're going to have to do, and they're going to be difficult, right? That's the expense of it. But the goal is made. And in order for you to stay motivated, you can't not have this. You have to have the reward in mind. You have to know what you're going to get out of this. Because the more you understand about your reward, the more motivated you'll be. Because if you're lose 10 kg, you know about the probability and you know about the cost, but in your mind, the reward is just because it's good and I want to lose it. It's not a good enough answer. Of course you'd want it, but why? You really got to dig deep into why you want it. So moving into your own apartment, perhaps you want to have a bit of independence, a bit of privacy, a bit of adult self-respect. And, this can go really deep. So let me just give an example for this. Well, perhaps you don't like the people that you live with now. So if you live with family, it's a bit of a taboo thing to say, but, some people, they're not a big fan of living with their parents, especially if, you're a little bit older, perhaps in your mid-20s, you might be thinking oh, it's so embarrassing that I live at home with my parents, and, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to live in my own place and feel like an actual adult rather than, feel crappy for for not doing that. Yeah, you want some independence. Why would you want to be independent? Why can't you just depend on someone? And to that, you probably think, well, I have a history of being completely incompetent, and I don't like the idea that people think I'm incompetent. And the reason why I think I'm incompetent is because all of these things that may have happened in the past. And it's a bit deep, but it's necessary. Right? We're talking about big goals here. We're talking about big changes. So yeah, it'll get like pretty deep into it, and you've got to really, really look in here to figure out why you want the things that you want. The number one trait I found in like the most successful editors is that they all, most successful people, full stop, is that they all come from a place of wild, like, need to prove themselves, or like some wild insecurity. And yeah, this goes for like all entrepreneurs, but also editors included. Like, I'll have people talk to me like it was their life on the line, like they were going to war or something, and it's just editing. But they take it that serious because there's a lot of like deep things in here that can be solved, a lot of problems that can be solved, and the reward is just much bigger for them. So for this next one, like making 10K per month as a freelancer, someone who comes from a poorer background whilst living around rich people would probably want this more than someone who's just one of the richer ones. So for example, I have these friends and I've been trying to get them to edit, not just like for ages. I've been trying to get them to do something. But at the beginning, I always tried to get them to get into editing because I was like, we used to make YouTube videos back then, and I was like, guys, you can do this as well. And they just didn't want to because, they have a nice house, they get money from their parents, and, they're always just well off. They never really needed it. But for me, I don't really get that same treatment. I didn't have a big, like, fancy multi-million-dollar house. I mean, still nice house, very grateful and all. But because the pain for me of not being able to have that money was a lot worse. Like, I didn't, for example, pocket money, which is like when your parents give you money to spend, didn't have that. So my idea of getting money was different to them. It was a lot harder. Or like when we would leave school, I would go with these group of people, these friends, and they would always go to the shops and buy something, and I never had any money. And I felt like I was a leech just trying to take something from them, and they would never give it to me. So, stuff like this, experiences like this make you realize and make you learn, well, I've got to do things differently. So the reward for me to achieve this would be like so much bigger and so much greater than it would be for that group of people or for, my friends. Like, they would care a lot less about the money because it doesn't solve as big a problem in here than it would for them. Now we're going to get into how. So how is it created and how is it lost? Well, first of all, we need to have a challenging, tangible goal, that is wanted and created. By challenging, I mean it's got to be something big, so big that it scares you. The reason for this is because if we have a goal that doesn't seem too different to who we currently are and the life we currently live, it's not motivating enough. It's realistic, and when you set these realistic goals, you only do it because you're afraid of not hitting that goal, so you would rather give yourself a realistic goal that you can hit so that you don't feel bad for yourself at the end of the year. But the trouble with this is, and the reason why people go wrong here is because when they set this goal, they immediately realize that they don't want to do the work because they don't feel motivated to do it. You need to have something big to motivate you. For example, if your goal is, $5,000 per month, because that would, do you nicely as an editor and as someone who, you can afford the life that you want to live, and, you won't have to worry about food or rent or whatever, whatever the kind of economy you have in your country. Think bigger. Think 20K per month. And you might be thinking, Danny, 20K isn't possible. But it is. I've seen editors hit 20K per month. I can't say for myself that I've hit 20K per month from editing. And I'm okay to admit that because money was never really my main goal. But, the whole 10K thing I have done just out of, different motivations. So the reason why we want to aim for something as big as this is because if it's that scary, your mind is going to start thinking okay, well, it is actually nicer and it would be cooler to hit that. And if I did hit that, my life would change so drastically. So now you want it more. And then you start to think of ways that would help you to get there faster. So let's say you do about $15,000 a year from editing. and then you want to go to $200,000. Big jump, big, not even 100, $200,000. This jump is gonna seem so big to you, like you're not even gonna be thinking about the small, little, like tiny change that you can make. You're gonna start to think about the big changes, right? You're gonna do a lot more movement, a lot more action, a lot more drastic changes, right? What this means is that once, let's say the year is over and it's now January 1st, 2027, and you haven't hit 200K, instead, let's say you hit like 160K, you fell short by about $40,000. Like, okay, we didn't hit the goal, and that sucks. But you would have never hit 160 had you aimed for 100K or 50K, right? You would have never hit such a big number because your mind would have prepared for something much smaller. Therefore, it would have created action steps that were much, much smaller. You'd be thinking a lot smaller. If you're aiming for 5K per month, and I say go for 20K, and let's say you're currently at like 800, you're going to start thinking very differently. Because I can tell you, like, from 800 to 5K, improve your editing a bit, land, 2 clients consistently, and you're there, right? You're not going to take that too seriously because the difference between this and this is huge, right? You're going to have to start seriously treating yourself like you have to be the best of the best. You have to genuinely provide such an insane service that you feel kind of embarrassed about where you currently are, and it stresses you out that you're going to have to, put in so much effort. But let's say currently you have a 1 out of 10 effort. That's how much effort you put into your videos. And to hit 5K, you're going to have to put in about 6 out of 10 effort. Or do you know what? Let's just do it like this for math's sakes. So then this is going to be 2, this is going to be 12 or 11, and then this is going to be 20. Like, you're going to have to put in so much more effort, right? And this could even be like something like 9 or whatever. But this effort is going to make so much more. And everyone has fallbacks, right? Now, I'm not saying you're going to go on a perfect streak and you're going to do it immediately. But what I am saying is that you are definitely going to have setbacks. You're definitely going to have moments where you feel like you should give up, or that you should quit, or you feel like moments are moving really slowly. Again, that's going to happen regardless. But if you have that whilst aiming for 5K, you're going to fall much shorter. If you have that whilst hitting 20K, you could probably be at like, you could end the year at 10K per month and feel the same amount of pain in terms of like, oh, I'm not doing as much work. But the rest of your life is great because you're making double your original goal. So if you're going to fall short, you might as well fall short on a huge goal. And that sounds so silly, like, oh my God, yeah, no, it's so obvious. But like, you would be surprised. I still fall for this mistake, right? I still, sometimes aim for smaller goals, and then I realize that I don't do it. So for example, full transparency, my goal is $1 million a year. Big, huge number. Terrifies me. I hate it. Ugh, I hate it. My original goal was about 300K. Right? Now it's a million. And I feel so weird saying, I've never said it before, my goal is $1 million a year. Oh, that's so weird. It's exciting, but it's scary. But I know that if I want to do it, to have consistent YouTube videos, I have to. Like, it's a non-negotiable. I can't slack off like I did last year, right? So it's got to be challenging. And I just spent 8 minutes explaining the word challenging. Tangible. It's got to be something that you can actually have. Like, for example, if I said like financial freedom, right? What does that mean? Like, what is financial freedom to you? Oh, well, it means I can do that. No. Let's actually like pan it out. What freedom is there? What life do you consider to be freedom? Oh, well, I want to be able to work X amount of hours and make X amount of money. And I want to be able to, do this and that with these people. And I said, okay, cool. We know that. So how many hours a day? Oh, okay. So how many clients? Oh, okay. How much money? Oh, okay. So you've got to aim for X amount per month. So for example, I did the calculations. If I wanted to, because London is expensive, right? I live in London. If I wanted to live in London with my own place, with my own car, by paying bills and food and business expenses, no, not even business expenses, like you can take out business expenses. It's going to cost me about $12,000 per month minimum. I'll have to make 12K per month minimum if I want to live the life that I'd want in London. And that goes to show how expensive it is. So if I were to say financial freedom, what I actually mean to say is make at least 12K per month as a freelancer to live the life that I want to live. So it has to be tangible. It has to be something that we can aim for. So again, instead of lose weight or lose fat, it's like, lose 10 kg of fat, reach 15% body fat, right? So it's got to be something difficult, and it's got to be something that you can actually measure out so that you know how to get there. And again, I'm going to cover how we're going to get there later on. So strong probability, your self-beliefs are strong and proof of completion exists. So for example, it's got to be done by somebody before, right? You have to have seen somebody do it before to know. And like, if you see like one guy do it before, then you can ask him about it. Or if you can't ask him about it, look for more people who have done it. Once you've figured out like, okay, other people have done it before, now you've got to kind of figure out is there something about me that says no? Again, most likely it's a huge no. And we'll get into that later. Okay, so feedback loops are essentially like you do something and then the result of that something tells you more about yourself. For example, if you outreach 100 times and you don't get a single reply, that tells you no one wants to work with you, right? And we've got to make sure that these are all positive. We want to make sure we have as much positive feedback, so we start saying nice things about ourselves and we have positive beliefs, because if we don't have good beliefs, right, we're going to think it's not possible. And then you've got to think about the costs. So you've got to feel like these are justified costs, costs you're willing to make, sacrifices you're willing to make in order to get the result. So for example, like lose 10 kg, you're going to have to be okay with saying goodbye to stuff like this. And, with making 12K per month as a freelancer, you've got to be okay with doing this. You've got to be okay with, changing your routine, changing yourself, talking less to your friends who, don't share the same goals. And it's difficult, but it's necessary. So once you know the goal, it's a challenging and tangible goal, and you make sure that your feedback loops stay positive. This is like a repetitive thing. This isn't just done once. You have to keep doing this. And then costs, you know what your costs are. So this is how motivation is created. You see the full map. You see everything you need to do and everything you need to have. Once you've agreed with all this stuff, you're like, I can do this. Let's do this. Let's try this out. Let's just go for it. And then you feel motivated. You feel amped and hyped up to do it. Remember when I was like talking about $1 million a year? Like, did you see the big smile on my face? Look at it now. I'm loving it. And some people are, they're going to listen to your crazy goals and they're going to be like, yeah, but it's just not going to happen. Like, you need to be more, you need to be more realistic with yourself. Fuck realistic, bro. Genuinely, on so many levels, fuck realistic. I want to quickly talk about realism before I talk about this stuff, right? Because fuck realistic. This moment means so much to me. If you don't know, and I haven't put it somewhere on this video or in the title or whatever, or the description, I've been an editor for 5 years, and I've worked with plenty of huge creators, many of which I can't talk about. It's 2026, so I think some of my NDAs are up. But yeah, I've worked with plenty of creators like, Nick or Milana, so, guys from the Beta Squad. I've even received offers from Beta Squad and other big channels. I've received offers from like the Cyben, Vjong, Mr. Beast, Reacts from like a few years ago. I've worked with Ali, I've worked with Jessa. Just feel free to like search this stuff up, like Mr. Who's the Boss. And yeah, I've worked with quite a few creators. A lot of big ones, a lot of big names. But this was the moment, 2023, 16th of June, best day of my life. And the reason for this was because I had gotten into this room with these guys from SDS. These guys. This is a channel by a guy called Sharky, who's one of the guys from SDS. And you're probably thinking, they have 300,000 subscribers. Why so? Why do you care so much? Well, because I used to watch these guys, and I used to watch Sharky, more specifically in the Beta Squad stuff. And when I stepped in there, for me, at this point in my life, I had been editing for about 2 years, freelance editing, and I had worked with like a few decent names, I hadn't thought that much of myself. In my own head, I still thought of myself as the same loser from, secondary school or high school. Because I don't really talk to a lot of people. I was like this in-betweener between like the, when you're not part of the cool kids, but you're also not entirely a loser, but you think of yourself as a loser. So, once you start telling yourself that you're a loser, that feeds back into your mind, reaffirming that you're a loser. And then you stop talking to people, you start collapsing. And, I wasn't very good at a lot of things. I actually played like instruments like the violin and the drums, but I was scared of, not being good, so I stopped doing it. And I was, scared of committing to something, so I stopped doing it, and I wasn't very good. And that wasn't really the case. I just kind of told myself I wasn't very good at it. And I have this cousin. We used to play like with, these toy cars. I swear to God, I'm getting somewhere. I'm not like trying to trauma dump on you, but this is going to seriously matter. We used to play with these cars, and I would ask him, okay, can I be first this time? Can I win? And he'd always say like, no, but if you want to win, you're going to have to play in your own race, not in mine, because I always come first. And I didn't like that. I wanted to be first at some point. I was never first in anything. I never felt like I would be the best or good at anything. So yeah, that was unfortunate. And I always felt like I would never be first or never be good at anything ever. Then I stepped into this room and I looked to my left and I saw Sharky sitting by the table. So it was this table, right? And I'm taking the picture. Sharky's on my right here, and at this moment, he was sitting on the left over here. And he kind of just walked up to me. He dapped me up. And then he kind of sat me down. He was run me through the whole thing. And he was asking me for more, for my advice and my thoughts. And I was like, why is Sharky, this guy that I've been watching on YouTube for years, asking me for my opinion? Like, I'm nobody. And for this split second when I met him, everything had changed. Like, everything that I thought to believe, where important people lived in this part of the world and losers lived in this part of the world. We were never in the same rooms, never in the same head. Like, we never spoke to each other. This is just how my mind operated. Then he was asking me for my opinions and my thoughts, and that all broke immediately. That's when I kind of just looked at myself and I just thought, in this split moment, like, in my 18 years of living had just all happened all over again in that moment. And suddenly I went from loser to hot shit. I was like, all right, calm down. Here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to do this, this, and that. This is how sick it's going to be. This is what we're going to do. This is what's going to make it fun and cool. And these are the designs. I'm already going to make something. Don't you worry, Sharky. I'm going to cook something up. And I had this weird confidence from all of a sudden. I actually don't know if I won this game. I won the first 2 rounds. Then I got cocky. Then I got silenced. But I was having a good time, which I would not have done had I thought I was a total loser. I would have stayed quiet in my head. This is important because if you have these ideas that you are a loser and that you can't do it because for some reason you are the problem, you're never going to get in a situation like that. Like, the only reason I ever got into a situation like this because I enjoyed being good at something. Editing took all of that stuff away from me for a while. It took away the fact that I wasn't good at anything or that I thought that I wasn't smart. Because it took me a while to realize, but when I walked into this room, I realized I am smart, I am good at something, I can be the best at something. And after this moment, my motivation was just to be just the best. It was a scary goal, but it was like being the best. And, for that, I just had to work with any creator that I wanted to work with, I would work with. And I put that goal to mind, and it happened. Like, hands down, the greatest moment of my life. I don't think it could be topped. Something insane would have to happen to top this very moment. But yeah, sorry for dumping that on you. But I hope it can be a lesson to you to, make sure that you do have a goal. And it is scary. And, you don't tell yourself that you can't do it. You don't listen to others around you. Because if others tell you, be realistic, it's not going to happen. Fuck that. I thought that these two worlds didn't exist. I thought when people told me they met celebrities, I was like, oh, so you're cool. Okay, so we're not in the same bubble. You see, I'm in the loser bubble and you're in the cool people bubble because only cool people get to meet celebrities. I don't. Like, they would never want to be near me. They would never want to be around me. And Sharky's like, he's not exactly a celebrity, but he's like, when we were out in public, he was recognized quite a bit. And that's like attention cool people had, and I didn't think that I was cool until I met him. Then I thought I was hot shit. Then I would go to parties and my friends would talk about me and they'd say, oh, when the girls would approach, they'd be like, this, you see my friend here? He knows Sharky. He knows the Beta Squad. He's fucking cool. And then they would be like, oh my God, I love Beta Squad. And I'd be like, guys, please, you seriously got to calm down. I'm too cool to be here. If you start fangirling, I'm gonna have to leave. I didn't actually do that, but point is like I was a lot more confident. But yeah, it's super important you have this stuff. This isn't me to saying like I didn't use this story to brag. I'm using this story to let you know that we don't live in two bubbles. It's not that there are just losers here and cool people here. It is possible, and if you think that you're a loser, use it to your advantage, right? Use it and become someone bigger and better, and then hopefully one day you'll realize that you are smart and you are cool and you can hit big goals. But motivation can also be lost as well as created, right? For example, your goal can be vague. Perhaps you didn't think about the strength of it at first. If you don't truly think about why you want something, you're going to lose sight of it very, very quickly. So if you think for a second, like, okay, well, you lose 10 kg. Okay, that's a good goal. That's a tangible goal. And perhaps it can be a bit scary. But what would it mean to me? Like, if you're just like, I'll just be like in shape, I guess, and that'll be cool. Again, very vague. You got to really, really, really find out what it is and why you're like that. You've got to really think about that. And it can take like a bit of like practice, a bit of just like sitting there and thinking with just a pen and a notepad and just sitting there. And it gets a bit deep, For example, you can find out something that I found out, which was, and again, not to get too deep on you, but it's a deep video. And, chances are is if anyone is fed up of the deep stuff, they would have clicked off by now. And like, point is, I learned that I thought love had to be achieved by being good at something or being, the best at something. Probably makes a lot of sense. Definitely makes a lot of sense. And I thought, yeah, the only way that somebody could love you is if you were good at something or the best at something or, rich. So that was my goal. And if you don't figure that out, it might not be like that for you. But point is, like, if you don't look that deep into yourself, you're going to forget about why you did this in the first place. So then when the weak moments come, you forget about why you did it. And then you're more prone to quitting. And we don't want to quit. And then also you want to think about the expectation. So, for example, you will keep working without getting the results that you thought you would get. So this most happens when you set a time limit on it. So I'll have people telling me like, okay, I want to make like, 10K in 5 months, 10 months. I want to make 15K per month in 6 months. And I'm like, cool, that I appreciate, you being super bold and stuff. But when you set time limits on stuff, that's when things get a little bit like, because you don't know how long it's going to take. You just want to aim for the goal. How long it takes, you don't know. But the point is, if you think it's going to happen sooner, that's only going to make you want to give up more. So if I told you, like, if you want to make 10K per month as an editor and you currently make 800, could you do that in 10 minutes? You'd probably say to me, well, Danny, no, 10 minutes. Like, what am I, stupid? But that same logic applies for 6 months or 12. Like, just think about the end goal. Don't think about how long it's going to take. This is like the number one killer. And I know I said $1 million in a year, but after a while of understanding how it works, like 12 months is one of those ones where it's big enough for our minds not to be able to comprehend. I don't know where I'm going to be in a year's time or 2 years' time. I could probably guess where I'm going to be in 6 months, right? So I would rather combine the unknown with the unknown rather than combining the known with the unknown, if you know what I mean. And then cost inflation, you could completely underestimate the amount of time it takes or, the amount of effort it takes. And then it gets more tiring because you have to keep doing it. Then you stop. And then you start to think, well, you know what? This wasn't worth it. And then you'll procrastinate. You'll avoid, doing the work. And then you'll start coping. You'll consume more, right? I ran into this recently. You'll start to consume more and create less. And that's just your coping mechanism. But yeah, motivation is intentionally taken away by your brain when the expected cost is bigger than the expected return. When you think it's going to be easier than it actually is. So let's remove that and let's change it up by setting a big goal in order to make yourself work harder and, then your actual goal. Don't think about the timeline of it. Just think about the end result. Because then that 10K or that 5K or that 8K, whatever your goal may be, time freedom, or or, you know, to build a life outside of editing, you know, perhaps you're already at a good point with editing, you just want to build a life outside of it, then just think about how that life is going to look, and then, you know, look towards going for it. And, you know, you could probably fall short, but it's, again, much better to fall short on a big goal than a small one. So now we're going to be thinking about, well, the action steps. What do we do to stay motivated? What are these worksheets that I was kind of explaining? So we have 3 documents here to go through. So one of these I've already provided in a previous video, so you might already have this, you might not. But it's reverse engineering your goal, which is where you'll have your goal in mind, and then you figure out how you can actually get there through just daily work. But then to find that goal, we'll go through these worksheets first. So this is going to be the first one, this is the second one, and this is the last one. And, you know, they're relatively long, but not that long. Shouldn't take you more than an hour and a half maximum. Yeah, like this one has 19 questions, this one has like 30, and then this one is just like a procedure. And if you want to just, you know, fill in all of these questions, then what you want to do is you want to go to File and then Make a Copy. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to request to edit, because I get a lot of like emails and notifications, and it'll just pile up and it'll get in the way of things, because, you know, this is just one document. So you don't edit it. But what you want to do is you want to go to Make a Copy, and then you want to say your name. So Danny's goal setting worksheet, right? And then put it wherever you want. And then same for this and same for this. Now, this first one is about goal setting, of course, and finding out what it's going to cost. Not literally, like you're not going to do any maths here. Don't worry. I was never a big fan of maths either. But yeah, so there's a few questions here. I'm going to answer them with you. Obviously, I'm not going to go through everything because this video is long enough already. We don't need to make it any longer. But yeah, so the first question is, you know, just like, if nothing changed in your life for the next 5 years, what would scare you the most? If you take your current life, you add 5 years, and things are still like that, what would scare you the most? Is it the fact that you failed yourself? Is it the fact that, you know, other people would have progressed, or someone specific might progress faster than you? Like, do you feel like you're in constant competition with someone? Etc., etc. And then, you know, what does an ideal normal weekday look for you? You know, for example, for me, a normal weekday would be, I'll wake up and I'll go to the gym because it makes me feel refreshed in the morning. And, you know, there's a sauna over there at the gym. So, you know, I get to refresh myself doing that. Then I'll grab a quick coffee and I'll do maybe some writing or some kind of work or something creative, but some kind of creative work, you know, from about 10 or 11 a.m. all the way up until like maybe 4 p.m. Then I'll go to, you know, the cinema. I like movies. I like going to the cinema. I'll watch a film. Then I'll probably, you know, hang out with friends at, you know, at some kind of event or some kind of, you know, pub or coffee shop and then whatever, right? And then I'll go home and I'll chill out. Maybe, you know, watch another film, do more work, or, you know, play like a bit of CSGO or something, or I don't know, just chill out, right? Read a book. You know, I've got plenty of books that I could probably start reading up on, but just something like that. But like a normal, just a regular day, you know? What do you want less of in your current life? Noise. So I don't like the idea of being constantly exposed to content. I don't like the idea of constantly consuming. It makes me feel lost. It makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel kind of comparative. You know, when you're like on Instagram too much, you'll start thinking of like, oh, my life isn't as cool as that, right? But, you know, fuck Instagram. What does a good life look like to you without copying anyone else? Now, oftentimes we'll look at other people and just assume that we want what they want without actually thinking about what we want. And I thought that was the same thing for me. Like my answer a year ago for this would have been like, oh, you know, wake up at 5 a.m., go to the gym, come back, and then work for 10 hours. But realistically, I didn't actually really want to do that because there's only like some parts of work that I really do enjoy. And some parts you feel like you have to do. You know, what does financial freedom actually allow you to do day to day? What do you not have, or what are you not doing right now because you don't have financial freedom that you would get if you did have financial freedom? What feelings are you chasing through this success? Perhaps just ego, perhaps pride, perhaps you want to feel a bit more important because right now you don't feel so important when you haven't accomplished so much. And editing will do that. Editing will, you know, you'll start accomplishing things through editing and then you'll start feeling important through editing. Again, like we mentioned earlier, that's what I was, you know, I had gone through. And then, you know, a few more few more questions. They are going to be a bit deep. If you don't understand them, then what you can do is you can always just go to like ChatGPT and say like, look, I'm going through a worksheet that I have to answer right now, and I have to answer deeply. Could you tell me what this means? And then, yeah, ultimately, you'll be able to kind of tell yourself what your goal is. And perhaps it will be a tangible goal, like, for example, 10K per month, 10K per month. And then you'll be able to go through this reverse engineering worksheet once you know what your daily like income goal is. So it can just be any kind of goal, but income goal, this is what this worksheet is for. And then for your current self worksheet, this is going to help you to explore a bit more about you, because perhaps there are parts about yourself that you think or probably are stopping you from achieving your goals, right? So first of all, let's actually kind of describe you. Who are you? How would you describe yourself right now? And obviously we want to sum it up in 3 sentences so we don't keep rambling, and that we can kind of really truly reflect on ourselves. Where do you currently live? How much money do you currently make and have? When it comes to the idea of financial freedom, how do you currently present yourself? What do you look like? Do you perhaps care about how you look? Do you not care about how you look? Self-conscious, that can also play a part. And the reason why this stuff matters is because like editing it opens you to the world of business, and a lot of people assume that they'll have like these businessy problems with outreach and stuff, but most times it's not even most times, it's every single time you have a problem in your business, it's not about your business problem, it's about a personal problem that you have, or interpersonal problem that you have that reflects in your business, but you just think it's the business problem. Then we want to kind of cover something called binary poles. So binary poles are words we use to describe ourselves that ultimately stop us from allowing ourselves to be the complete opposite. And what this means is that if you tie yourself down to a binary pole, then you don't allow yourself to be the other thing, and that other thing could be the one thing that you need in order to achieve your goal. So we've got all of this stuff here. So for example, do you operate with logic, or do you operate under just intuition and how you feel? Are you tight with money, loose with money, masculine, feminine, disciplined, undisciplined, right? So if you think that you're undisciplined, well, you're going to want to start treating yourself and thinking of yourself as, and of course, acting disciplined. Sensible, silly, organized, disorganized, obviously all of this other stuff, right? Do you like mornings, or are you more of someone who performs at night? And if you say you're more this, well, then perhaps it's time to start thinking about, being able to perform early in the morning, And this will basically help you to kind of think about what is it that you value, what is it that you put first, perhaps, and then that'll help you to maybe realize, okay, perhaps I'm missing something here that I don't care about. So for example, are you selfish to yourself, or do you care more about others? So these can both screw you over in ways that you don't realize. When it comes to giving to others, you probably, perhaps you think sales is wrong. The idea of sales and following up and trying to sell to people is wrong because it feels like you just want to take, and you're more giving, right? And to that, you'll have to realize, okay, well, perhaps I have to be a bit more selfish. I have to realize, well, this is something that I want, and I've got to take it for myself. No one else is going to help me with this. And as for the selfish part, perhaps you might be a bit too salesy, a bit too pushy, and when you land your clients, you don't care about the service delivery, then you have poor service, but you kind of overpromise and oversell, and then you underdeliver, and then, you kind of screw over your clients in the process, and that ultimately puts you at ground zero. So then we want to think about good habits and bad habits. So what are things that you do repeatedly? List all of them. Okay. And be honest, like this isn't going to be something that you want to share with me or anyone. This is just going to be for you, so you can understand a bit more about yourself. And then your strengths. So what are your strengths? List 5. What are your weaknesses? List 5. What are some negative things that pop into your mind on a daily basis? List all of them. This could be things about yourself, negative things in general. Perhaps you're too judgy, and you're judging other people without knowing them. Perhaps you immediately think the worst in people. And the reason this is important is because what I've noticed is that these negative things are often projections of yourself, right? So for example, if you judge other people, it is because, you're very judgy of yourself. If you say, oh, look at this other guy, look, look, he's outreaching to me, that's so cringe. Well, that's because, you kind of stop yourself from outreaching because you think that outreaching is cringe, and then you don't allow yourself to outreach the way that you want to, and then, you can't get clients, and that's because you're judging other people. So, that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And then your childhood, describe that. So for example, we mentioned earlier, I had, the cousin, and we were playing the racing games, and I was never allowed to be first, ultimately making me realize I want to be first in things, and I achieved, or I strive to achieve that through editing. And then what past events do you worry about? What do you replay in your mind all the time? Is there something cringe that you did? If so, why do you think about that? Okay, seriously, just, write this stuff down. What do you worry about in the future? Why do you worry about that? Do you worry about your income, right? If so, why? Do you feel like that you don't have the skills to make that kind of money? Do you think that you're forever doomed? Do you think that you are unable to, therefore you worry about it? So for example, I don't worry about this because I feel like I've got a skill set, or I've got a few skill sets that can help me to, make money in case everything that I build one day just falls to the ground. And, what things block you from doing what you want to do each day and working towards your dreams and goals? Why is it blocking you? People, yourself, things that you think. Perhaps it could be those negative things that pop into your head, or your weaknesses. Who are you currently angry at? What people or things do you blame, and why? Do you blame someone for not being able to be, so perhaps somebody in your environments who is constantly being negative in your ear or doesn't allow you to work? Who do you currently judge, and what do you judge them for? Why? Okay, and then, we've got all these other ones. And then you're going to notice that a lot of these have why at the end. It is really important that you learn to understand this. And then if you don't, then just go through some form of Socratic thinking and just think, well, why is this the case? And then again, a lot of people will do this, just go to ChatGPT and just start talking to it. That might also help. And then, describe the average day currently. So not the dream one, the ideal one we were talking about earlier. And then, character traits. And then the last one is, how do you imagine other people gossip and talk about you in a cafe? And why do you think that way? So I used to think, if I said something cringy, then people would talk about me, oh, that guy's so cringe. I never think about that. I can't really imagine people talking about me in a cafe, to be honest. I don't feel like I make that much of an impact. But if they do, I don't imagine it would be anything but nice things. And that's not just me being egotistical. I just legitimately think I either leave no impression or I leave a positive one. Because if there's somebody that I don't like, I'm not going to outwardly try and argue with them or, project onto them. I just kind of leave be. So you have plenty of questions to go through, plenty of thinking to do, reflecting to do. And the reason, of course, why all of this matters is so that you can ultimately create and define a goal that will truly scare you and truly motivate you to work. Because if you don't know what it is or why it is, you'll never be able to, stay motivated. You've got to have this big goal that you truly want to get. And if it's to the point where it's scary of you telling other people, do it. Remember, I told 2,000 people, hey man, I want to make $1 million in a year. So whether I hit it or not, I don't care for people's responses. I just care about how I perform. And at least if I fall short, I can maybe hit 400 or 500,000, or even, again, 300,000 I would like to hit, because that was my original goal. All I ask for you to do is, if you like this video or you didn't like this video, tell me why or what you do want to see. I do plan to really go hard on content this year. And, well, by me telling you that, now I have to do it.